Hey guys, tonight we are taking a long journey. We are crossing the endless sands of the Silk Road. But don't worry, we aren't sleeping in the cold. We are arriving at the Caravanserai, the castle of the desert. We are going to experience the luxury, the spices, and the safety of the ancient trade routes. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. Now, listen to the distant bells of the camels, feel the warmth of the desert fire, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The sun is dying now, slow and certain, bleeding its last crimson light across the horizon where the sky meets the endless rippling ocean of sand. You have been walking since before dawn, when the world was still wrapped in that peculiar desert cold that makes your breath visible in small clouds, when the stars were still sharp as broken glass overhead. Now, as the day surrenders to evening, the temperature is beginning its nightly collapse, that sudden shocking drop that transforms the Taklamakan from furnace to freezer in the space of an hour. The wind has been your constant companion all day, but it changes its voice as twilight approaches. During the bright, brutal hours of afternoon, it roared and bellowed, whipping the sand into stinging clouds that forced you to wrap cloth across your face, to squint your eyes nearly shut, to bow your head and simply endure. But now it hisses. It whispers. It moves across the corrugated surface of the dunes with a sound like silk being pulled slowly across silk, a susurration that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere, a sound that gets inside your head and stays there. The Taklamakan Desert. The name itself means something close to go in and you won't come out in the old Uyghur tongue. A sea of sand stretching 300,000 square kilometers, larger than many kingdoms, hostile to nearly all life. The Gobi lies to the northeast, equally merciless, equally vast. Between them, threading through the narrow corridors where water can occasionally be found, where the ancient riverbeds still sometimes flow, runs the Silk Road. Not really a road at all, of course. More like a memory of a route, a series of landmarks known to those who have survived the crossing before. A pathway measured not in paving stones, but in the bleached bones of those who miscalculated their water supply or lost their way in a sandstorm. You can feel the cold beginning to assert itself now. The sand beneath your feet, which burned through the soles of your boots just 2 hours ago, is already cooling, that heat radiating up into the darkening sky as if the desert itself is exhaling. Soon it will be cold enough to see your breath again. Soon the temperature will plunge below freezing, and the same sand that scorched you by day will leach every bit of warmth from your body by night. This is the cruel mathematics of the desert, the way it tries to kill you with opposite extremes, fire and ice, in 12-hour cycles. The isolation out here is almost absolute. For the last 3 days you have seen nothing but sand and sky, the occasional jutting rock formation rising like the ruins of some giant's castle, worn smooth by 10,000 years of wind. No trees, no grass, no birds wheeling overhead. Just the vast indifference of the wasteland, beautiful in its way, terrible in its emptiness. During the day, the sun turns the sand into a blinding mirror of light, every dune reflecting the fierce glare until your eyes ache and water. Now, in the gathering dusk, the dunes are turning purple and grey, their shadows lengthening, the whole landscape transforming into something dreamlike, almost unreal. The sky above is deepening through shades of rose and violet and indigo, that particular clarity you only get in the desert where there is no moisture to blur the transition from day to night. The first stars are already visible in the east, appearing one by one as if someone is lighting lamps in the vault of heaven. Soon there will be thousands of them, then tens of thousands, a blazing canopy of light, unmarred by clouds or haze, so bright you could almost read by their glow. Out here, far from any settlement, the stars seem close enough to touch, close enough to pluck from the sky like fruit. But the beauty of the desert night is a dangerous seduction. Without shelter, without fire, a traveler will be dead by morning, frozen solid, another anonymous casualty of the Silk Road. The temperature will drop to well below freezing, and the wind that sounds so peaceful now in its hissing susurration will cut through any clothing, will find every gap and opening, will steal the heat from your body with methodical efficiency. The desert does not care about your appreciation of its beauty. It will kill you just the same. Your legs ache from the day's walking, that deep-bone tiredness that comes from hour after hour of trudging through sand that shifts and slides beneath every step, forcing your muscles to constantly adjust and compensate. Your shoulders are sore from the weight of your pack. Your lips are cracked despite the water you have been rationing carefully from your leather flask. Your face feels tight and hot where the sun has burned it, even through the protective wrappings. Every part of you is covered in a fine layer of dust that has worked its way into your clothes, your hair, the folds of your skin, gritty and irritating. The light is fading faster now, that accelerated sunset of the open desert, where there are no hills or buildings to slow the sun's descent. The western horizon is still holding onto a band of deep orange fire, but overhead the sky has already turned to dark blue velvet, and the eastern quadrant is fully night. Shadows are pooling in the hollows between the dunes, spreading like dark water, merging and expanding. Soon it will be too dark to walk safely, too easy to stumble and turn an ankle, to lose the subtle landmarks that mark the route. The wind shifts slightly, and for a moment you catch a scent on the air, not the usual smell of the desert, that ancient mineral odor of sand and stone. Something else, something organic. Wood smoke, perhaps, though so faint you cannot be certain. You stop walking and turn your head slowly, trying to locate the direction, but it is gone as quickly as it came, and you wonder if you imagined it, if your tired mind is inventing signs of salvation that do not exist. The hiss of the wind continues, steady and almost hypnotic, a white noise that begins to numb the mind after long exposure. It is the sound of emptiness, of negation, of the slow, patient work of erosion that will eventually reduce these mountains of sand to flat plains, that will wear down the rock formations until they disappear, that will erase every trace of human passage as if it never occurred. Somewhere out in that vastness are the ruins of ancient cities, whole civilizations swallowed by the advancing dunes, their temples and palaces and marketplaces buried beneath hundreds of feet of sand, waiting for the wind to uncover them briefly before burying them again. You have heard the stories around the evening fires, of course. Everyone who travels the Silk Road has heard them. Tales of ghost cities that appear in the shimmer of midday heat, perfect in every detail, only to vanish when approached. Stories of the sound of caravan bells heard in the empty desert, leading travelers astray to their deaths. Accounts of ancient spirits that dance in the dust devils, angry at being disturbed after centuries of sleep. You do not entirely believe these stories, but you do not entirely disbelieve them either. The desert has a way of making you reconsider what is possible. The cold is becoming more pronounced now, a real physical presence rather than just a lessening of heat. You can feel it on your face, in your lungs when you breathe, settling over your shoulders like a heavy cloak. Your fingers are starting to stiffen slightly, and you flex them to keep the blood moving. The temperature must have dropped 10 or 15 degrees just in the last half hour, and it will drop another 30 before midnight. Without shelter, this is a death sentence, as certain as poison, just slower. The isolation presses in on all sides, vast and heavy. There is something about being alone in such emptiness that affects the mind in strange ways. Time seems to lose its normal flow. Distances become impossible to judge. You find yourself thinking thoughts that would never occur to you in a city, strange circular meditations on existence and impermanence, on the smallness of human life against the scale of geological time. The desert strips away pretense and reveals what is essential, and what is essential is very simple. Water, shelter, warmth. Everything else is luxury. The sand beneath your feet is singing now, that peculiar phenomenon that occurs in certain conditions when the grains slide against each other in just the right way, producing a low, humming note like a distant chorus of monks. It is beautiful and eerie, this song of the desert, rising and falling with the wind, sometimes clear and strong, sometimes fading to almost nothing. Some travelers find it soothing. Others find it deeply unsettling, as if the earth itself is trying to communicate some message in a language beyond human comprehension. Ahead of you, the dunes march to the horizon in parallel waves, their crests sharp as knife edges against the darkening sky. Each one is slightly different in size and shape, sculpted by the wind into forms both organic and geometric, curves and angles, hollows and peaks. In the changing light, they seem almost to move, to breathe, to shift position when you are not looking directly at them. Your eyes are tired, and tired eyes play tricks. You have learned not to trust everything you see in the desert, especially in the marginal hours of dawn and dusk. The wind carries that scent again, stronger this time, unmistakable, wood smoke. And beneath it, the faintest suggestion of something cooking, roasting meat perhaps, though the distance is still too great to be certain. But it is real, not imagined, which means there is fire somewhere ahead, and fire means people, and people means shelter. Your pace quickens slightly despite your exhaustion, hope providing a small surge of energy. The hissing of the wind continues its endless commentary, a sound so constant it has become almost like silence, a baseline against which any other sound would stand out with shocking clarity. It hisses over the faces of the dunes, across the rippled surfaces in the troughs, around the occasional exposed rocks that interrupt the sand, patient and tireless, the voice of deep time, of processes that dwarf human lifespans. Twilight is nearly complete now. The band of orange on the western horizon has shrunk to a thin line, and overhead the stars are emerging in their thousands, that incredible profusion of light you only witness far from civilization. The Milky Way is a river of pale fire flowing across the dome of the sky, so dense with stars that individual points of light blur together into luminous clouds. You can see Jupiter low in the south, brilliant and steady, and what might be Saturn near it, and the familiar patterns of constellations your father taught you to recognize when you were a child. But there is no time for stargazing, not with the temperature dropping and the night coming on. You need shelter, need it desperately, and you need it soon. The scent of smoke is a promise, but promises can be cruel in the desert. Distances are deceptive in this landscape. What seems close can be hours away. What seems hours away can be just beyond the next dune. There is no way to know except to keep walking. And then you see it. Just for a moment at first. You crest a particularly high dune, and there in the distance, perhaps a mile away, perhaps two, still far but achievable, you see a shape that is not sand, not stone. A straight line where there should be only curves. An angle where there should be only organic forms. You stop and stare, afraid to blink in case it vanishes, afraid it might be another trick of exhausted eyes and desperate hope. But it does not vanish. As your eyes adjust and focus, the shape resolves itself into something more distinct. Walls. Stone walls, pale in the starlight, rising square and solid from the desert floor. And at the top of those walls, small points of warm orange light. Torches, torches burning at the gate. The Caravanserai. Relief floods through you so powerfully it is almost painful, makes your eyes sting and your throat tighten. You are not going to die tonight. You are not going to freeze in the darkness, another nameless victim of the desert's indifference. There is shelter ahead, and warmth and safety. The castle of the desert, the fortress against the night, just as real and solid as the stories promised. The structure sits in a shallow depression between the dunes, positioned with the careful eye of builders who understood the desert's moods, low enough to be sheltered from the worst of the wind, high enough to avoid the rare but devastating flash floods that can turn dry wadis into raging torrents in minutes. Even from this distance, you can see that it is substantial, built to last, built to protect. The walls are perhaps 20 feet high, constructed from pale sandstone blocks cut and fitted with precision, each one the size of a man's torso, locked together without mortar in the ancient way that allows for expansion and contraction in the extreme temperature swings. The corners are reinforced with heavier stones, and you can just make out the shapes of battlements along the top, crenellations that would allow defenders to shoot arrows or drop stones on any attackers. Though this far from any kingdom, any organized army, the greatest enemy is simply the desert itself. The torches at the gate burn with that distinctive orange-yellow flame of oil rather than wood, precious oil, carried hundreds of miles for exactly this purpose, to mark the entrance, to signal safety to travelers who might otherwise pass by in the darkness. They flicker and stream in the wind, the flames bending almost horizontal before snapping back upright, casting dancing shadows on the pale stone. As you watch, you think you can see a figure moving on the walls, a guard perhaps, though at this distance it is hard to be certain. The sight of the caravanserai fills you with an emotion difficult to name, a complex mixture of relief and gratitude, and something almost like love. This building, this simple, functional fortress in the middle of nowhere, represents everything that separates human civilization from the void. It is cooperation made solid, the agreement that travelers will help travelers, that those who arrive first will share their shelter and fire with those who come after, because today's host may be tomorrow's desperate wayfarer. You begin the descent from the dune's crest, half walking, half sliding down the slip face where the sand is loose and unstable. Your tired legs wobble, and you have to use your arms for balance, but the knowledge that shelter is near gives you renewed strength. Behind you, the last light is fading from the western sky, and ahead the torches burn like beacons, like promises kept. The mile to the caravanserai feels like it takes hours. The sand seems determined to slow you down, grabbing at your feet, hiding uneven ground that makes you stumble. The light is fading faster now, that last rush toward full darkness, and you have to concentrate to avoid obstacles, the occasional half-buried rock or unexpected dip in the terrain. The wind is colder still, and you pull your wrappings tighter, hunch your shoulders against it. But with each step the walls grow larger, more distinct. You can see details now that were invisible from the distance. The weathering on the stones where wind-driven sand has polished their southern faces. The dark rectangular opening of the gate, recessed slightly into the wall's thickness. The geometric patterns carved into the lintel above the entrance, decorative work that serves no practical purpose, except to announce that this is a place made by humans for humans, not just a crude shelter, but a work of craft and intention. The torches are mounted in iron brackets on either side of the gate, substantial things. The flame guards designed to protect the fire from the wind while still allowing enough air to keep them burning. The wood of the torch handles is dark with age and oil, charred at the tips from years of use. The flames themselves are almost hypnotic in their dancing, never still, never quite the same from one moment to the next, creating shifting patterns of light and shadow that make the stone seem to move. As you draw closer, perhaps 100 yards from the gate now, you become aware of sound beyond the wind's eternal hiss. The low murmur of voices, many voices, blending together into a wordless susurration that means people, community, the shared space of human gathering. And beneath that, the sound of animals, the occasional snort or groan that could only come from camels, the desert ships that make this whole impossible network of trade routes viable. The gate is open, you can see now, a heavy wooden door bound with iron straps pulled back and latched to the wall. Beyond it, the interior of the courtyard is lost in shadow, though you can see the warm glow of fires reflecting off stone, can see the suggestion of movement, people going about the evening's work. The threshold between the hostile desert and the protected interior seems almost magical, a boundary between two different worlds. 50 yards now, close enough to see the individual stones in the walls, to note where repairs have been made over the years, lighter colored blocks replacing those damaged by weather or time. Close enough to feel the warmth radiating from within, the accumulated heat of fires and bodies and shelter. Close enough to smell more than just smoke now, to catch the rich scent of cooking food, roasting meat and baking bread, smells that make your stomach clench with sudden urgent hunger after a day of eating nothing but dried fruit and hard cheese. And then, distinct and clear above all other sounds, you hear them, the bells, the deep bronze song of camel bells, that unique sound that is inseparable from the Silk Road, from these ancient trade routes, from the whole vast enterprise of moving goods thousands of miles across deserts and mountains and steppes. Not the high silvery tinkle of small bells, but the deep resonant clung of large bells, heavy bells, bells made to be heard over distance and wind. The sound is coming from behind you, and you turn to look back the way you came. There, perhaps a quarter-mile distant, emerging from between two dunes like a vision out of legend, is a camel train. You count quickly. 20 camels, maybe more, moving in single file, the distinctive swaying walking gait that identifies them instantly as Bactrians, the two-humped camels of the northern routes, different from the single-humped dromedaries of the southern deserts. Even from this distance, you can see the shaggy bulk of them, the thick winter coats they are already growing against the coming months of cold. Bactrian camels are larger than their southern cousins, heavier, built for the brutal winters of Central Asia, where temperatures can drop to 40 below, where snow buries the landscape for months at a time. Their coats are already transforming them into walking haystacks, dense masses of wool that will grow even thicker as winter deepens, insulation against cold that would kill an unprotected human in hours. The bells hang from leather collars around their necks, enormous things, some of them as large as a man's head, bronze or brass, dented and scarred from years of travel. Each camel carries multiple bells of different sizes and tones, and together they create a complex harmony, a constantly shifting chord that rings out across the desert. Clung, clung, clung. Clung, clung, clung. The sound is almost soporific in its rhythm, matching the slow rolling pace of the camel's walk, hypnotic and ancient, a sound that has marked the Silk Road for 1,000 years. The camels are heavily laden. You can see even from here, packs and bales strapped to wooden saddles that sit between their humps, the loads carefully balanced to distribute weight evenly across their backs. These are working animals, beasts of burden, each one capable of carrying 400 or 500 pounds across terrain that would break a horse or ox. They move with patient determination, neither fast nor slow, conserving energy for the long haul, bred over generations for exactly this work. Behind the camels you can see the caravan's men, dark figures wrapped in layers of felt and leather and fur, leading the animals, walking alongside them, their own bells and chimes adding to the complex music. These are professionals, people who know the routes as well as you know the rooms of your own house, who can read weather in the color of the dawn sky, who navigate by stars and landmarks and the subtle signs that mean water or danger or a place to camp. The bells continue their song. Clung, clung, clung. Clung, clung, clung. The sound carries with perfect clarity in the cold, dry air, seems to hang suspended, ringing in your ears even in the gaps between strikes. It is a lullaby, that sound, something that could put you to sleep standing up if you let it. The reassuring rhythm of routine and safety, and the simple comfort of not being alone in the vastness. You turn back to the caravanserai, and now you are close enough to see a figure standing in the gateway, silhouetted against the firelight from within. The gatekeeper, watching your approach, making certain you mean no harm. You raise a hand in greeting, the universal gesture of peaceful intent, and after a moment the figure raises his own hand in return. Welcome. You are welcome here. Enter and be safe. The last few yards pass beneath your feet, and then you are standing at the threshold, the boundary between outside and inside, between the hostile night and the protected space. You pause for just a moment, savoring the transition, And then you step through the gate into the courtyard of the Caravanserai, and everything changes. The first thing that strikes you is the noise. After days of nothing but wind and silence, broken only by your own breathing and footsteps, the sound of dozens of people and animals all in one enclosed space is almost overwhelming. Voices calling to each other in a dozen different languages, the groaning and grunting of camels, the clang of pots and pans, the crackle of fires, laughter from somewhere in the shadows. The whole complex symphony of human activity, chaotic and beautiful and reassuring beyond measure. The second thing is the smell. Wood smoke, yes, that was detectable from outside. But inside the courtyard, the air is thick with 100 different scents all layered on top of each other. The clean mineral smell of water from the central well. The rich, meaty aroma of something roasting over a fire. The yeasty scent of bread baking in clay ovens. The sharp, pungent smell of camel dung and urine. The exotic fragrance of spices, cinnamon and cloves and cardamom leaking from cargo bales. The smell of unwashed human bodies, not unpleasant exactly but earthy and present. The sweet smoke of incense from some trader's offering to his guards. The smell of leather and wool and oil and iron. All of it mixing together into an olfactory tapestry that speaks of commerce and travel and the meeting of distant cultures. The third thing is the architecture, and you have to stop and simply look up and around to take it in. The caravanserai is built as a perfect square, each wall perhaps 100 feet long, enclosing a courtyard open to the sky. The walls you saw from outside form the outer perimeter, but the inner face of those walls is lined with 2 stories of arches, creating a covered arcade that runs around all 4 sides of the courtyard. The arches are pointed in the Persian style, elegant and efficient, each one perhaps 10 feet wide and 12 feet tall at the apex. The lower level of arches opens onto what are clearly storage rooms or stables, dark rectangular spaces where you can see the shapes of camels and donkeys and even a few horses, the animals secured for the night, already working on piles of fodder spread on the ground before them. Some of the lower rooms are clearly being used for cargo storage as well, and you can see bales and crates and sacks stacked inside, valuable goods protected from weather and theft. The upper level of arches is reached by stone staircases at each corner of the courtyard, the steps worn smooth by countless feet over the years. These upper chambers are the sleeping rooms, the private spaces where traders can rest secure behind lockable doors, where they can sleep without fear of having their throats cut in the night. Each upper arch is fitted with a wooden door, and many of them are already closed, warm yellow lamplight leaking through the cracks, the occupants settling in for the night. The architecture is beautiful in its symmetry and function, every element serving a purpose, nothing wasted. The arches create a rhythm all around the courtyard, repeating over and over, creating a sense of order and proportion that is deeply satisfying to the eye. The stonework is expert, the blocks fitted so precisely that you could not slide a knife blade between them, the weight of the upper story distributed perfectly down through the columns that support the arches. In the center of the courtyard, exactly where geometry suggests it should be, is the well. Not a simple hole in the ground, but a proper engineered structure, the wellhead built up 3 feet above ground level in a circular wall of fitted stones, a wooden frame above it supporting a pulley system for raising buckets. The well is the heart of the caravanserai, the reason this particular spot was chosen for construction, the source of the water that makes all the rest possible. Without the well, there would be no fortress, no shelter, no meeting place for traders from 1,000 miles in every direction. Around the well, the courtyard is a scene of organized chaos. Fires burn in iron braziers placed at intervals around the perimeter, their flames providing light and warmth as full darkness settles over the desert outside. Near each fire are clusters of people, some sitting on carpets and cushions, others standing, engaged in the evening's activities. Cooking, eating, repairing gear, checking cargo, negotiating deals, telling stories. The ordinary business of the Silk Road. condensed into this one protected space. The population of the courtyard is as varied as the cargo they carry. You can identify traders from a dozen different ethnic groups just at a glance. Han Chinese with their distinctive robes and topknots, Persians in embroidered coats and wound turbans, Sogdian merchants, the master traders of the Silk Road, speaking their Iranian language, their faces weathered by years of travel. Uyghurs and Kazakhs and Mongols, some still in their riding clothes, fur-lined coats and felt boots. Even a few Indians, probably from the Kashmir region, their dark faces and bright silks standing out against the more muted tones favored by the northern peoples. The languages washing around the courtyard are equally diverse. You hear Chinese and Persian and Sogdian and Turkic dialects, and probably half a dozen others you cannot identify. Most of the traders speak at least some Persian, the lingua franca of the Silk Road, enough to negotiate prices and discuss routes and weather. But in their own groups, they revert to their native tongues, and the result is a constant background babble of incomprehensible syllables that somehow resolves into communication. You stand just inside the gate for a moment, getting your bearings, letting the reality of safety sink in. Behind you, the wind still hisses across the desert, the temperature still drops degree by degree, but here inside these walls you are protected. The walls block the wind. The fires provide warmth. The well provides water. The community provides security. All the elements of survival gathered in one place. From outside the walls you hear the bells again, louder now. Clung, clung, clung. Clung, clung, clung. The camel train you saw is approaching the gate, will be here in minutes. The courtyard will become even more crowded, even more chaotic, but that is good. More people means more security, more shared resources, more stories and news from distant places. The Caravanserai is built to hold perhaps 200 people and their animals comfortably. Tonight it might shelter half that number, maybe more with the new caravan arriving. You make your way toward the well, weaving between groups of people, stepping over outstretched legs and piles of gear. Everyone is too busy with their own concerns to pay you much attention, though a few nod in greeting, acknowledging your presence, the automatic courtesy of fellow travelers. The courtyard is perhaps 60 feet across, and it takes you a minute to navigate to the center. Up close, the well is even more impressive. The stones of the wellhead are worn smooth by thousands of hands gripping the edge to peer down into the depths or to steady buckets as they are hauled up. The wood of the frame is dark and polished. The rope that runs through the pulley is thick as your wrist, made of hemp or perhaps camel hair, strong enough to lift the heavy leather buckets from whatever depth the water lies at. You lean over the edge and look down. The well shaft drops straight into darkness, perfectly circular, lined with fitted stones all the way down. You cannot see the water from here, but you can hear it, a faint echoing sound when someone's voice carries down the shaft just right, the subtle acoustic shift that means liquid surface may be 50 feet below. That is not unusual. In the desert, groundwater often lies deep, and the labor of digging wells and lining them with stone is enormous. This well represents countless hours of skilled work, is probably older than anyone currently alive, maintained year after year, because without it this place would be uninhabitable. Someone has left a filled bucket sitting on the wellhead, water sloshing slightly with the movement of people nearby. You cup your hands and dip them in, lift the cold water to your face. It is shockingly cold, much colder than the air, drawn from deep enough that it never feels the sun. You splash it over your face, feel the dust and grit sluicing away, the coolness soothing your sunburned skin. The water tastes faintly mineral but clean, sweet compared to the stale warmth in your leather flask. You drink deeply, feeling the cold liquid trace a path down your throat to your stomach, feeling your body absorb it gratefully. Behind you the bells are very loud now, right outside the gate. Clung, clung, clung. Clung, clung, clung. You turn to watch as the first of the camels comes through the entrance, its massive head swaying side to side with each step, its large eyes with their double row of lashes blinking against the firelight. The animal is enormous up close. 7 feet tall at the shoulder, maybe more, both humps thick with stored fat, its entire body covered in that shaggy coat that will only get thicker as winter approaches. The bells around its neck swing with its gait, producing that deep bronze song. Clung, clung, clung. Each step triggers the sound, the rhythm perfectly matched to the animal's pace. The largest bell is the size of a cooking pot, dented and scarred, its surface covered in verdigris where the bronze has oxidized. The smaller bells create higher harmonies, and together they make a chord that resonates in your chest, a physical sensation as much as a sound. The camel is followed by another, and another, and another, the whole train filing through the gate in orderly procession. 23 camels you count in total, each one laden with cargo, each one wearing its collar of bells. The sound in the enclosed courtyard is overwhelming, all those bells ringing at once, creating a wall of bronze music that seems to vibrate the very stones. The men leading the caravan are shouting instructions to each other, directing the camels to the left side of the courtyard where there is still space for unloading. The animals follow obediently, well trained, patient after the long day's walk. They move with that distinctive Bactrian gait, the rolling lurch that comes from moving both legs on one side together, then both on the other side. A walk that looks awkward but can be maintained mile after mile, hour after hour, day after day, covering distances that would kill a horse. As the camels settle into position, the men begin the work of making them kneel for unloading. This is done with a specific sound, a guttural command that seems to be universal among camel handlers. The camels respond with their own sounds, groaning complaints that are remarkably loud, deep bellowing protests that seem too large to come from any living creature. But they obey, folding their front legs first, then their back, lowering themselves to the ground with surprising grace for such massive animals. You realize you should find space for yourself, somewhere to spread your sleeping roll, somewhere to store your pack. The courtyard is filling up quickly now, and the best spots will be claimed soon. You head toward the eastern side, where there seems to be a little more room, near one of the fires where a group of Sogdian traders have set up camp. One of them looks up as you approach, waves you over with a gesture that clearly means you are welcome to share their fire. You nod your thanks and drop your pack near the wall, begin the process of unpacking what you will need for the night. Your sleeping roll, your food bag, your teapot and cup, the simple necessities of a night at the Caravanserai. Around you the work of settling in continues. The camel train is being systematically unloaded, the men working in pairs to lift the heavy cargo from the animals' backs. These are clearly experienced handlers, their movements efficient and practiced, no wasted motion. They unbuckle the leather straps that secure the loads, steady the bales as they slide them off the wooden saddles, lower them carefully to the ground. The cargo itself is fascinating. Bales of raw silk, the material that gives the trade route its name, wrapped in rough burlap to protect the precious fiber from moisture and dirt. You can see the burlap is stained with travel, dark with the sweat of the camels that carried it, dusty from hundreds of miles of desert. Each bale probably weighs 60 or 70 pounds, solid blocks of compressed silk cocoons or woven fabric, worth more than most people will earn in a lifetime. Sacks of spices, smaller than the silk bales, but equally valuable in their own way. Even through the heavy cloth you can smell them, pepper and cinnamon and cassia, cardamom and cloves, and the sharp astringent scent of something you cannot identify. The sacks are made of thick hemp, double sewn to prevent any loss of the precious contents, each one marked with strange characters that probably indicate weight and origin and ownership. You can feel the texture of these materials even from a distance, can imagine the roughness of the burlap, the slight give of the silk bales beneath the wrapping, the granular shift of the spice sacks when moved. Every item speaks of distant places, of the incredible network of trade that connects the Chinese capital to the markets of Samarkand and beyond, to Persia and Baghdad, and eventually to Rome itself. thousands upon thousands of miles of trade routes carrying goods and ideas and diseases and technologies across the width of the known world. As each camel is unloaded, the men lead it toward the animal pens on the ground level, the covered arcades where fodder has been spread. The camels move slowly, tired after their day's walk, their bells still ringing but more quietly now, just the slight movement of their heads as they walk creating gentle chimes. They will eat tonight, drink their fill from troughs filled from the well, then settle into the sand to sleep, their massive bodies generating enough heat that they need no other shelter even on the coldest nights. The work continues as darkness completes its conquest of the sky overhead. The stars are out in full now, thousands and thousands of them, the Milky Way a river of light flowing directly over the courtyard. The moon has not yet risen, and in its absence, the stars seem even brighter, casting enough light that you can almost see colors in the courtyard, though most illumination comes from the fires and torches. Near you, one. But sleep does not come immediately. Your body is exhausted, yes, but your mind is still active, still processing the day's journey, still adjusting to the transition from solitude to community. And there is something else, something pulling at your attention. From somewhere within the covered arcades, from one of the ground-level rooms that open onto the courtyard, comes a warm golden light more steady than the flickering fires, and with it, voices and the particular quality of sound that suggests an enclosed space, walls and ceiling containing and focusing the noise. The common room. Every caravanserai has one, a space set aside for communal gathering, for eating and drinking and conducting business, for the social rituals that bind travelers together. You had noticed it earlier when you first entered, but in the rush to secure space and tend to your animals, you had not given it much attention. Now, with the immediate necessities handled, you find yourself curious, drawn to that warm light and the promise of hot food and human conversation. You rise from your sleeping roll, leaving your pack where it lies, safe enough in the courtyard with so many eyes around, and make your way toward the light. The common room is located beneath one of the sleeping chambers on the eastern side, its entrance marked by an arch slightly larger than the others, the opening hung with thick felt curtains to hold in the warmth. You push through the curtains and step inside. The contrast with the courtyard is immediate and striking. Where the courtyard is open to the stars and the night wind, the common room is enclosed, intimate, the ceiling low enough that a tall man would need to stoop in places. Where the courtyard is lit by scattered fires creating pools of light and shadow, the common room is illuminated by oil lamps hung from hooks in the ceiling and set in niches in the walls, their steady flames creating a warm golden glow that reaches every corner. Where the courtyard is cold, except right next to the fires, the common room is genuinely warm, heated by a large clay oven in the center that serves both for cooking and for climate control. The room is perhaps 30 feet on a side, the walls the same fitted stone as the exterior, but plastered and whitewashed on the inside, creating a smooth, bright surface that reflects the lamplight. The floor is covered with carpets, layers of them, different sizes and patterns overlapping, creating a soft surface that muffles footsteps and adds to the sense of comfort. Around the perimeter of the room are low platforms covered with more carpets and piled with cushions, creating seating areas where perhaps 20 or 30 people could recline in comfort. And there are people, perhaps a dozen of them scattered around the room in small groups, some eating, some drinking, some engaged in quiet conversation, some simply resting in the warmth. The atmosphere is relaxed, convivial, the hard edges of the day's travel softened by food and heat and safety. No one looks up as you enter. New arrivals are constant, unremarkable, but neither do you feel unwelcome. This is a public space, open to all who shelter within these walls. But what captures your attention immediately, what draws your eye and holds it, is the figure in the center of the room, near the oven. An old man, his face weathered to the color and texture of old leather, his beard long and white, his hands moving with the practiced grace of someone performing a familiar ritual. The tea master. Every caravanserai of any size has one, a specialist whose sole responsibility is the preparation and serving of tea, an art form that is taken with deep seriousness throughout Central Asia and beyond. This particular tea master is dressed in a simple robe of dark blue wool, belted at the waist, his head covered with a small embroidered cap. Before him on a low table is an array of implements, a large pot of boiling water sitting at the edge of the oven's heat, several teapots of different sizes, small handleless cups arranged in precise rows, containers of tea leaves and sugar and spices, all laid out with the careful attention of a craftsman's workspace. You find an empty spot on one of the platforms and settle onto the cushions, arranging yourself cross-legged, and watch the tea master work. He is preparing a fresh pot now, and his movements are worth watching, each gesture economical and purposeful, the accumulated wisdom of decades distilled into motion. First, he takes one of the teapots, a beautiful ceramic piece with a long curved spout, and rinses it with boiling water, swirling the water around to heat the pot before dumping it into a waste bowl. Then he measures tea into the pot, not the loose leaves common in China, but compressed brick tea, breaking off chunks with his fingers and dropping them in. The amount seems arbitrary, but you suspect is measured with precision born of long experience, enough for strength, not so much as to create bitterness. Next comes the water, and this is where the real artistry begins. The tea master lifts the large pot of boiling water with one hand, the other hand held behind his back in the classical style, and begins to pour. But he does not simply pour the water into the teapot. Instead, he raises the large pot high, perhaps 3 feet above the table, and pours from that height, the stream of water falling in a long arc, thin and precise, hitting the teapot with a sound like rain on stone. The purpose of this technique becomes clear as you watch. The long fall through the air cools the water slightly, bringing it down from a full boil to a temperature better suited for tea extraction. It also aerates the water, introducing oxygen, creating tiny bubbles that will affect the flavor and mouthfeel of the finished tea. And it is beautiful to watch. That silver arc of water falling through the lamplight, steam rising from it, the sound creating a kind of percussion, the whole performance both functional and aesthetic. The tea master pours with absolute control, the stream never wavering, never splashing outside the teapots, opening despite the distance and the constant flow. When the pot is full, he lowers the large pot smoothly, sets it aside, and places a lid on the teapot. The tea will steep now, the hot water drawing out the flavors and colors from the compressed leaves, transforming clear water into the dark aromatic brew. While the tea steeps, the tea master prepares the next phase. Into several of the small cups he measures sugar, not the refined white sugar of later centuries, but raw brown sugar, sticky and fragrant, rich with molasses overtones. Into other cups he adds nothing, leaving them ready for those who prefer their tea bitter. And into a small bowl he grates something that releases an immediate and powerful fragrance into the warm air: cardamom. The smell of cardamom is extraordinary, intense and complex, simultaneously sweet and spicy, floral and woody, with undertones of eucalyptus and citrus. It cuts through all the other smells in the room, the meaty scent of roasting food, the woolly odor of carpets and cushions, the oil smoke from the lamps, and dominates the olfactory landscape. Even from where you sit, several feet away, the scent is strong enough to make your mouth water, to trigger memories of other times and places where you have encountered this particular spice. The tea master adds a pinch of the ground cardamom to each cup that already contains sugar, the pale green powder mixing with the brown crystals. This is the Persian style of tea preparation, different from the Chinese method with its emphasis on pure tea flavor, different from the Central Asian tradition of adding salt and butter. This is tea as it is drunk in the bazaars of Isfahan and Shiraz, sweet and spiced, warming and comforting, a drink that is both stimulant and sedative, clarifying the mind while soothing the nerves. The teapot has steeped long enough now. The tea master lifts it, feels its weight with the unconscious assessment of long practice, and begins to pour. Again, the technique is striking. He does not pour directly into the cups, but pours from one part into another, back and forth, mixing and aerating, ensuring that the strength is even throughout, that the first cup poured will be identical to the last. The liquid that flows between the parts is dark as coffee, almost black, the concentrated essence of tea that will be further diluted in the individual cups. Finally, he begins to serve. One by one, he pours tea into the prepared cups, the dark liquid mixing with the sugar and cardamom, steam rising in wisps and curls. The steam itself seems to carry the scent, spreading the fragrance of cardamom and tea throughout the room, a smell that is warming even before you taste it, a promise of comfort and restoration. The tea master's assistant, a young boy of perhaps 10 or 12, takes the filled cups on a wooden tray and moves around the room, offering them to the guests. The boy comes to you, and you take a cup with both hands, nodding your thanks. The cup is hot, almost too hot to hold comfortably, the heat radiating through the ceramic into your palms and fingers. You hold it carefully, letting the warmth sink in, letting the steam rise toward your face. The smell is intoxicating. The cardamom is the dominant note, that complex spicy sweet fragrance, but beneath it you can detect the deep earthy smell of the tea itself, and the caramel sweetness of the sugar beginning to dissolve in the heat. All of it together creates an olfactory experience that is rich and layered, that seems to change as you breathe it in, different notes emerging and receding, a complexity that matches any fine wine or perfume. You lift the cup to your lips and sip carefully, mindful of the heat. The first taste is intensely sweet, the sugar not yet fully dissolved, creating a syrupy concentration at the bottom of the cup. But as you swallow, other flavors emerge. The astringency of the tea, the tannins gripping your tongue, and the roof of your mouth with that characteristic drying sensation. The warm spice of the cardamom, not burning like pepper but aromatic, almost cooling in its intensity, opening your sinuses and making you breathe deeper. The bitterness beneath the sweetness, the two flavors in tension, neither one overwhelming the other, but creating a balance that is greater than either alone. The liquid is very hot, and you have to sip slowly, taking in small amounts, letting each mouthful cool slightly on your tongue before swallowing. As it goes down, you can feel the heat spreading through your chest, radiating outward, seeming to warm you from the inside. The tea is strong enough that you can feel the caffeine beginning to work almost immediately, a subtle lifting sensation, a sharpening of focus, the fog of exhaustion retreating slightly. The tea master continues his work, preparing cup after cup, each one made with the same care and attention as the first. There is something meditative about watching him, the repetition of gesture, the economy of movement, the complete focus on the task at hand. He is not simply making tea, but performing a kind of ceremony, elevating a mundane necessity into an art form, creating beauty and meaning through attention and skill. The steam continues to rise from your cup, visible in the lamplight, curling and twisting in complex patterns as it encounters the air currents in the room. The steam carries the scent of cardamom throughout the space, mixing with the other smells, but somehow remaining distinct, identifiable beneath everything else. Each breath you take brings that fragrance, and with it a kind of relaxation, a loosening of muscles you did not realize were tense, a softening of mental edges that have been sharp all day. You take another sip, and another, slowly working through the cup. The sweetness is less intense now as the sugar dissolves and distributes through the liquid, creating a more even flavor profile. The tea has cooled slightly, enough that you can take larger mouthfuls, can really taste the complexity of the blend. There are flavors in here you cannot quite identify. undertones that might be from the water itself, the minerals dissolved in it from the deep aquifer, or might be from the teapot, seasoned by years of use, or might be from the cardamom releasing different aromatic compounds as it steeps. Around you, other guests are drinking their own tea, and you can see the same expressions of satisfaction and relief, the simple pleasure of a hot drink after a cold day, the restorative power of caffeine and sugar and spice. Some are drinking quickly, gulping the tea down to get the warmth into their bellies as fast as possible. Others, like you, are sipping slowly, savoring it, making it last. There is no hurry now. The work of the day is done. The night stretches ahead, and there is time for simple pleasures. The tea master catches your eye and raises an eyebrow slightly, a question. You nod, and he prepares another cup for you, the same careful process, the same attention to detail. The young assistant brings it to you, takes your empty cup away. This second cup tastes even better than the first, now that your palate is prepared, now that the initial assault of sweetness has passed, and you can appreciate the subtler flavors underneath. The warmth in the room is becoming soporific, the combination of the oven's heat and the hot tea and the softness of the cushions creating an almost overwhelming desire to simply lie back and sleep. But you resist, wanting to stay awake a little longer, wanting to absorb more of this atmosphere, this particular moment in time that will never come again. Not exactly like this, not with these same people in this same place under these same stars. The common room is filling up now as more travelers finish their tasks in the courtyard and seek the warmth and light inside. The low murmur of conversation is increasing in volume, different languages mixing together, creating a background hum that is soothing rather than disturbing, the sound of human community, the reassurance that you are not alone. Near the oven, someone has begun to prepare food, and new smells start to compete with the cardamom and tea. Bread, definitely bread, that unmistakable yeasty fragrance of dough meeting high heat, beginning to bake and brown and crisp. Your stomach responds immediately, reminding you that you have eaten nothing but a handful of dried fruit since morning, that your body needs fuel as well as warmth. That tea alone, however restorative, is not sufficient. The bread is being baked in the traditional manner, slapped directly onto the hot, curved interior wall of the clay oven, the dough adhering to the surface, cooking quickly in the intense heat. You can hear the sound of it, a wet slap as each piece of dough makes contact, then a sizzling hiss as the moisture begins to steam out. The baker is working quickly, preparing multiple loaves at once, a rhythm to his movements that suggests he has done this thousands of times, that his hands know the work without conscious thought. The smell of the baking bread intensifies, transforming from raw yeasty dough to something richer, more complex, the sugars in the flour beginning to caramelize, the proteins developing new flavors through the Maillard reaction, all the chemistry of cooking creating a result that is vastly more than the sum of its simple ingredients. It is a smell that speaks directly to something ancient in the human brain, a smell that means safety and nourishment and home, whatever home might be. The first loaves are done now, the baker using a long wooden paddle to peel them off the oven's wall, checking the bottoms to ensure they are properly browned. The flatbreads are irregular in shape, bubbled and blistered from the high heat, the surface golden brown with darker patches where the dough was thinnest and cooked fastest. Steam rises from them as they come out, the internal moisture still evaporating, the bread still actively cooking even after it leaves the oven. The baker places the hot loaves on a wooden board, and one of the servers brings it around the room, offering pieces to the guests. When it reaches you, you tear off a section, the bread still so hot you have to toss it from hand to hand for a moment before you can hold it. The exterior is crispy, almost cracker-like, but when you break it open, the interior is soft and chewy, still steaming, perfect. You bring the bread to your mouth and take a bite. The taste is simple but profound, flour and water and salt, and the subtle flavor that yeast imparts, along with the slight char from the oven's heat, a hint of smokiness that adds depth. The texture is wonderful, the crispy surface giving way to the soft interior, a contrast that makes each bite interesting, that makes you want to keep eating. The bread is still too hot, really, burning the roof of your mouth slightly, but you cannot stop eating it. After a day of dried rations, of preserved foods designed for travel rather than pleasure, this fresh hot bread is almost overwhelming in its deliciousness, its simplicity making it somehow more satisfying than any complex dish could be. You eat slowly, tearing off small pieces, chewing thoroughly, letting the flavors develop in your mouth. With the bread comes other food, brought out on platters and boards, set on low tables throughout the room for guests to help themselves. Dried apricots, their orange flesh wrinkled and concentrated, sweet and tart at the same time. Dried figs, even sweeter than the apricots, with a chewy texture and tiny crunchy seeds throughout. Dates from the oases to the south, so sweet they are almost like candy, their flesh sticky and dense with sugar. You take some of each, arranging them on the cloth in front of you. The apricots first, biting into the leathery flesh, feeling it give way slowly, releasing flavor gradually, making you work for it. The taste is intensely fruity, much more concentrated than fresh apricots, the drying process having removed the water and left everything else. The sugars and acids and aromatic compounds all magnified several times over. The tartness makes your mouth water, cutting through the lingering sweetness of the tea, preparing your palate for the next bite of bread. The figs are different, less tart, more straightforwardly sweet, with a complex flavor that hints at honey and caramel and something faintly nutty. The texture is wonderful, simultaneously chewy and yielding, the small seeds providing tiny points of crunch that contrast with the softness of the flesh. You eat slowly, alternating between bread and fruit, the combination somehow greater than either alone, the sweetness of the fruit enhancing the subtle flavors in the bread providing substance and body that balances the concentrated intensity of the dried fruit. The dates are almost too sweet, each one like a small balm of sugar, but after the long day's exertion your body craves that quick energy, needs those easily accessible calories. The flesh is sticky, clinging to your fingers, requiring you to lick them clean after each date, the sweetness coating your mouth, almost cloying but not quite, balanced by the bread and tea. You eat slowly, methodically, aware of your body's needs, but also aware that rushing would diminish the pleasure, would turn this simple meal into mere fuel instead of an experience worth savoring. Around you, other travelers are engaged in similar rituals, some eating alone in contemplative silence, others sharing food and conversation, the room filled with the quiet sounds of mastication and swallowing and satisfaction. The tea master has prepared more tea now, a different variety for those who want it, and the young assistant circulates with fresh cups. You wave him over and accept another cup, this one prepared differently, with less sugar and no cardamom, but with something else, a hint of rose perhaps, or jasmine, a floral note that transforms the tea into something delicate and perfumed, a contrast to the robust, spiced version you drank earlier. The combination of hot tea and bread and dried fruit is creating a pleasant warmth in your belly, a satisfied fullness that is not uncomfortable, not the bloated sensation of overeating, but rather the simple contentment of nutritional needs met after deprivation. Your body is processing the food, extracting the calories and nutrients, beginning the work of repair and restoration after the day's demands. The atmosphere in the common room is becoming almost drowsy, the warmth and food and dim lamplight combining to create an environment perfectly suited for rest. Conversations are dropping to murmurs, people shifting position on their cushions to recline more comfortably, the urgent energy of arrival and settlement giving way to the slow drift towards sleep. But you are not quite ready to sleep yet, not quite ready to surrender consciousness, because there is so much to observe, so much that is worth witnessing. The common room is a crossroads, a place where east meets west, where cultures that might be mortal enemies in other contexts come together in temporary alliance against the common foe of the desert's hostility. You let your gaze wander around the room, really looking at the other occupants for the first time, seeing them as individuals rather than just elements of the crowd. Near the oven, a group of three men in the distinctive robes and headwraps of Persian merchants, their faces animated as they discuss something, hands gesturing to emphasize points, occasionally breaking into laughter. Their language is musical to your ears, even though you do not understand it, the syllables flowing smoothly, the rhythm almost like poetry. On the opposite side of the room, a pair of Chinese traders, immediately identifiable by their clothing and hairstyles, sitting in comfortable silence, occasionally making brief comments to each other, but mostly just drinking tea and watching the room with calm observation. Their faces are harder to read than the Persians', their expressions more controlled, but you sense contentment in their stillness, satisfaction in the simple fact of being warm and fed and safe. Near you, the Sogdian merchants you saw earlier in the courtyard, still engaged in some negotiation, one of them making marks on a piece of paper with a brush and ink, calculating prices perhaps, or recording agreements. Their conversation is in their own Iranian dialect, different from Persian but related, and occasionally you catch a word or phrase that seems familiar, some cognate that illuminates meaning for just a moment before being lost again in the flow of incomprehensible speech. In the corner, almost hidden in shadow, a lone traveler who might be from India, his dark face and bright silk clothing suggesting origins far to the south and east. He sits cross-legged in perfect stillness, eyes half closed, and you wonder if he is meditating or simply very tired, resting in that state between waking and sleep. He seems completely self-contained, needing no interaction with anyone else, comfortable in his own company. There are others, too, traders and travelers of uncertain origin, their clothing and features mixing influences from multiple regions. People who have been on the road so long they have become creatures of the Silk Road itself, belonging everywhere and nowhere, more at home in caravanserais than in any city. These are the true professionals, the ones who make their living from the endless back and forth of trade, carrying goods and information and cultural influence across thousands of miles of hostile terrain. The languages washing around the room are like music, each one with its own distinctive sound and rhythm. The flowing Persian with its poetic cadences, the tonal Chinese with its precise syllables, the Sogdian with its guttural emphasis, the sing-song quality of what might be Turkic dialects, and underneath it all, the occasional phrase in lingua franca Persian that allows traders from different regions to communicate about practical matters, prices and routes and conditions, the essential vocabulary of commerce. The sound is almost overwhelming at first, a babble of incomprehensible speech that threatens to become mere noise. But as you sit and listen, letting it wash over you without trying to understand individual conversations, it transforms into something else, a kind of white noise that is strangely comforting. It is the sound of human connection, of people engaged in the fundamental work of communication and trade and mutual survival. The sound that has echoed along these routes for thousands of years, that will continue long after everyone in this room is dust. You close your eyes for a moment, just listening, letting the sound surround you. The murmur of voices, the clink of tea cups being set down on wooden tables, the crackle of the fire in the oven, the soft sound of fabric rustling as people shift position, the occasional scrape of a wooden bowl or plate, the quiet padding of feet on carpets as the servers move around the room. All of it together, creating a symphony of human habitation, the music of civilization persisting in the face of the desert's empty silence. When you open your eyes again, something has changed. A merchant near the center of the room has opened a sample box, one of the small wooden cases that traders carry to display their wares without having to unpack entire bales. He is showing his goods to a potential buyer, and from where you sit you can see him lifting items one by one from the box's compartments, each one wrapped in cloth or paper, each one treated with the care that valuable goods demand. The first item he unwraps is a stick of what appears to be cinnamon, the bark rolled tight into a quill, rich brown in color, the surface rough and fibrous. Even from several feet away, even in a room already filled with the smell of tea and cardamom and bread, the scent of the cinnamon is immediately noticeable, cutting through everything else with its distinctive warm, spicy fragrance. The smell of cinnamon is complex, simultaneously sweet and spicy, warm and aromatic, with undertones that suggest vanilla and clove without being quite either. It is a smell that is comforting and stimulating at the same time, familiar and exotic, homey and adventurous. The merchant passes the stick of cinnamon under his customer's nose, and even the customer's face, which had been carefully neutral in the manner of someone negotiating a price, softens slightly, responding unconsciously to the olfactory appeal. The merchant sets the cinnamon aside and unwraps the next item. Cloves, a handful of them scattered on a cloth, their distinctive nail-like shape immediately identifiable. These are whole cloves, the dried flower buds of a tropical tree that grows thousands of miles to the south and east, in the Spice Islands that are the ultimate source of so much of the world's most valuable aromatics. The smell of the cloves is even more powerful than the cinnamon, a sharp, intense fragrance that is almost medicinal in its strength. It is sweet, yes, but with a kind of astringency that catches in the back of the throat, a numbing quality that would probably be evident if you put one in your mouth. The eugenol oil that gives cloves their characteristic scent and flavor, also creating that distinctive dental anesthetic effect. The merchant invites his customer to smell more closely, and you see the customer lean in, inhaling deeply, his eyes closing slightly in response to the intensity of the scent. The cloves release their fragrance generously, the oils volatile at room temperature, needing no heat to become airborne. The smell spreads through the immediate area, and you find yourself breathing deeper, drawing it in, feeling it open your sinuses and sharpen your senses. The third item the merchant unwraps is different in character, lighter in color, more resinous in appearance. Frankincense, the aromatic tree resin that has been traded since ancient times, valued for religious ceremonies and medicinal uses, and simply for the beauty of its scent. The chunks are irregular, ranging from the size of a pea to the size of a walnut, pale yellow to light brown in color, somewhat translucent when held up to the light. The merchant takes a small brazier that has been sitting warming at the edge of the oven and places a chunk of frankincense on the glowing coals. The resin begins to melt and smoke immediately, releasing its fragrance into the air, and the smell that emerges is unlike the cinnamon or cloves, less sharp, more subtle, but no less complex. Frankincense smells piney and lemony at the same time, with resinous undertones and a slight bitterness that keeps it from being cloying. There is something ancient about the smell, something that speaks of temples and rituals and sacred spaces, though perhaps that is just association, cultural memory embedded in the collective unconscious. The smoke rises in thin wisps, curling and twisting, carrying the scent throughout the room. The combination of all three scents, cinnamon and cloves and frankincense, creates an olfactory experience that is almost overwhelming in its richness and complexity. Each scent is distinct, identifiable on its own, but they also blend and interact, creating harmonic notes that are greater than the individual components. The warm sweetness of cinnamon, the sharp numbing intensity of cloves, the resinous subtle complexity of frankincense. All of it together, creating a perfume that makes the common room feel like some exotic palace, some fairy tale setting rather than a simple way station in the desert. You breathe deeply, drawing the scented air into your lungs, feeling it spread through your body. The smells are having a physical effect, making you feel heavy and relaxed, your muscles loosening, your breathing slowing, your thoughts becoming less sharp and more diffuse. There is something almost narcotic about the combination, not intoxicating exactly, but sedating, calming, creating a profound sense of well-being and contentment. The merchant and his customer are still negotiating, their voices low, discussing prices and quantities and delivery terms, but you are no longer paying attention to their words, only to the smells, to the sensory experience they have created. The frankincense continues to smoke on its brazier. The cinnamon and cloves sit exposed to the air, and together they are transforming the atmosphere of the entire room, making it into something special, something worth remembering. Other traders in the room have noticed the display and are watching with interest, some of them clearly appraising the quality of the goods, others simply enjoying the smells. The spice trade is the backbone of the Silk Road, more valuable even than silk in terms of profit margins, and everyone in this room understands its importance, knows that these small aromatic items are worth more than their weight in gold in the right markets. The scents are making you drowsy now, that relaxed heaviness spreading from your limbs to your core, your eyelids becoming heavy, your thoughts slowing. But there is one more thing you want to see, one more item that has caught your attention. Across the room, another merchant has unwrapped a bolt of silk, the fabric catching the lamplight in a way that makes it seem to glow from within. You rise from your cushions, careful not to disturb your neighbors, and make your way across the room toward the silk. The merchant with the silk notices your approach and nods permission for you to look more closely. Up close, the fabric is even more beautiful than it appeared from a distance, the weave so fine, and even that it is almost impossible to see individual threads, the surface smooth and lustrous, the color a deep, rich blue that seems to shift and change as the light moves across it. The merchant gestures that you can touch it, and you reach out tentatively, letting your fingertips brush across the surface. The texture is extraordinary, impossibly smooth, like touching water or air or something that is not quite physical at all. Your hands are rough from travel, calloused and scarred, and the contrast between your skin and the silk is shocking, the difference between the crudest reality and the most refined possibility. You lift a corner of the fabric and rub it gently between your fingers, and it makes a sound, a soft swish-swish like a whisper, like a secret being shared. The sound is subtle but distinctive, the friction of silk on silk creating a kind of music, a susurration that is both tactile and auditory. You move the fabric again, swish-swish, the sound oddly satisfying, almost addictive, making you want to keep manipulating it just to hear that whisper again. The silk catches the lamplight in complex ways, reflecting some wavelengths and absorbing others, the deep blue color appearing almost black in the shadows and electric cobalt where the light strikes directly. The fabric seems to move even when held still, the way water moves, the way flames move, organic and alive in a way that no other textile quite matches. This is the material that gives the Silk Road its name, the ultimate luxury good, the fabric reserved for emperors and kings, the textile that has driven trade and warfare and cultural exchange for 1,000 years. The merchant tells you the price, a number that is staggering even by Silk Road standards, and you nod your understanding without any intention of purchasing. This is not fabric for someone like you. This is fabric for the very wealthy, for people who measure their worth in silk and jade and gold, who think nothing of spending a fortune on a single robe. But you are grateful for the chance to touch it, to experience its smoothness and beauty, to understand what drives men to cross deserts and mountains and endless steppes in pursuit of profit. You return the silk carefully to the merchant with a nod of thanks and make your way back to your spot. The spice seller has packed up his samples now, the negotiation apparently concluded, and the smell of frankincense is fading as the resin is consumed. The common room is quieting further, more people settling into sleep, or at least into drowsy contemplation, the energy level dropping as the night deepens. You realize it is time to find your actual sleeping place, the chamber you have rented for the night. The courtyard and its open air are acceptable in warm weather, but tonight is cold, and you have paid for the luxury of an enclosed space, a private room where you can secure your possessions and sleep without worry. You gather your things from where you left them in the courtyard, hoisting your pack onto your shoulders, and make your way to one of the corner staircases that lead to the upper level. The stairs are stone, worn smooth by countless feet, steep and narrow, requiring attention as you climb. At the top, a corridor runs along the length of the building, the upper level of arches visible on one side looking down into the courtyard, solid wall on the other side forming the outer perimeter of the caravanserai. Your room is the third door from the stairs, a simple wooden door with a heavy iron lock, the key hanging from your belt where you tied it earlier. You unlock the door and push it open, stepping into the small chamber that will be your shelter for the night. The room is perhaps 8 feet by 10 feet, the ceiling low and arched, the walls the same fitted stone as everywhere else, but here plastered smooth and whitewashed. There is a small window on the outer wall, fitted with wooden shutters that can be closed against the cold and locked from the inside. The floor is bare stone, but someone has left a pile of thick wool carpets folded in the corner, provided for guests to use as they wish. You close the door behind you and lock it, the heavy iron mechanism clicking into place with a satisfying solidity. This room is yours now, paid for and secure, a private space in the midst of the crowded caravanserai. You set your pack down and begin to unroll the carpets, spreading them across the stone floor to create insulation against the cold and a soft surface for sleeping. The carpets are beautiful, even in the dim light that filters through the window from the fires in the courtyard below. You can see intricate geometric patterns in deep reds and blues and golds, the work of nomadic weavers from the steppes, each carpet a portable artwork, months or years of labor compressed into textile form. The patterns are mesmerizing, repeating and interlocking in ways that seem both mathematical and organic, diamonds and stars, and stylized flowers, all connected in endless chains. You spread 3 carpets overlapping, creating a thick, soft surface that deadens all sound and provides real comfort. The pile is deep and soft, the wool still holding traces of the lanolin that makes it naturally water-resistant, giving it a faint organic smell that is pleasant rather than unpleasant. Running your hand across the surface, you can feel the individual tufts of wool, the texture varying depending on which direction you move your hand, against the pile or with it. With the floor covered, you unroll your sleeping pad on top of the carpets, adding another layer of cushioning and insulation. Your bedroll is simple, just a felt pad and a wool blanket, but on top of these layered carpets, it creates a sleeping surface more comfortable than many beds you have slept in. You arrange your pack at the head as a pillow, placing your most valuable items, your money pouch, your documents, your knife, close at hand where you can reach them in the dark if needed. Before settling in for the night, you move to the window and open the shutters slightly, looking out onto the courtyard below. The view is perfect, giving you a bird's eye perspective of the entire space, and what you see fills you with a sense of deep peace and security. The courtyard is quiet now, the frenetic activity of earlier hours completely stilled. Most of the travelers have retreated to their own rooms or found sleeping spaces around the perimeter, rolled in blankets, already lost to sleep. The fires that burned so brightly earlier have died down to beds of glowing embers, orange and red coals that pulse gently with each breath of air, providing just enough light to see by, creating pools of warm glow in the darkness. The camels in their pens are all asleep now, or at least resting, their massive bodies folded onto the sand in that peculiar way camels have, legs tucked beneath them, humps rising like small hills from their backs. In the dim ember light, they look almost mythical, like creatures from some ancient story rather than working animals, their shaggy coats making them appear even larger than they are. They are completely still except for the occasional twitch of an ear or the slow, steady rise and fall of their breathing. Deep in that state of rest, that large animals require after long exertion. The bells around their necks are silent now, no movement to trigger their bronze voices, but you can still almost hear them in your mind, that clung, clung, clung that has become the soundtrack of the Silk Road, the lullaby of the desert trade routes. The silence itself seems to carry the memory of sound, the absence of the bells somehow emphasizing how constant their music had been during the day's travel. A few figures are still moving in the courtyard, indistinct shapes in the darkness. The night watch, probably, the guards employed by the caravanserai to ensure security, to watch for fire or theft or any other trouble that might threaten the guests. One of them passes through your field of view, moving quietly between the sleeping forms, checking that all is well, that the fires are properly banked, that nothing is amiss. The sight is reassuring rather than alarming, evidence that you are protected, that others are taking responsibility for safety while you sleep. Above the courtyard, above the low walls of the caravanserai, the night sky is on full display, and the sight takes your breath away even though you have seen desert skies 100 times before. The stars are incredibly bright, incredibly close, so numerous that they blur together in places into luminous clouds, the Milky Way cutting across the dome of the heavens like a river of light. You can see individual stars with a clarity impossible in cities or even in forested lands where moisture in the air blurs and dims the light. Each star is a sharp point, brilliant and distinct, arranged in patterns that have guided travelers since humans first learned to navigate by the heavens. There is Polaris, the North Star, steady and reliable, marking true north. There are the patterns your father taught you as a child, the great hunter and the bear and the swan, stories written in light across the sky. The stars seem close enough to touch, close enough that you feel you could reach up and pluck one from the sky like fruit from a tree. Of course, this is illusion, you know. These are distant suns unimaginably far away, their light taking years or decades or centuries to reach your eyes. But the illusion is powerful nonetheless. There is something about the desert sky that collapses the distance between earth and heaven, that makes the cosmos feel intimate and immediate rather than distant and abstract. The moon has still not risen, and in its absence the stars reign supreme, providing enough light that you can see the landscape beyond the caravanserai walls, the dunes pale and ghostly, the shadows between them absolute black. The desert at night is a different world than the desert by day, transformed from burning hell to frozen beauty, dangerous in new ways, but also possessed of a kind of austere magnificence that is impossible not to appreciate. The wind that has been hissing across the dunes all day is still audible, a constant susurration, but here inside the thick walls it is muted, reduced to a whisper, a reminder of the hostility outside rather than a present threat. The walls are doing their job, blocking the wind, retaining heat, creating a pocket of safety in the midst of the wasteland. You can feel the solidity of the stone beneath your feet, the weight and permanence of it, the sense that this structure will endure long after you are gone, will shelter countless other travelers on countless other nights, a permanent fixture in an impermanent world. A shooting star traces a brief arc across the sky, a meteor burning up in the upper atmosphere, there and gone in less than a second, but bright enough to make you gasp. You make a wish, the automatic response, though you are not sure you believe such wishes have any power. Still, it is a human gesture, a way of acknowledging wonder, of participating in the ancient ritual of finding meaning in celestial events. The night is deep now, the hour late, and you can feel exhaustion finally claiming you, pulling you down towards sleep with irresistible force. You take one more long look at the courtyard, at the sleeping camels and the dying fires and the watchful guards, at the stars overhead and the dark desert beyond, fixing it all in memory, and then you close the shutters and latch them, sealing yourself into the warm darkness of the room. You make your way carefully to your sleeping carpets in the near-total darkness, the only light coming from thin cracks around the door where lamplight from the corridor leaks through. You lie down on the cushioned surface, pulling your wool blanket over yourself, arranging it to cover you completely from chin to toes. The blanket smells of wool and smoke, and the indefinable scent of travel, familiar and comforting, a smell that means safety and rest. The carpets beneath you are remarkably comfortable, the thick pile conforming to your body, cushioning every pressure point. The layers of textile create real insulation from the cold stone floor, and with the blanket over you and the wool beneath you, you are warm despite the cold night outside. You can hear the wind still hissing beyond the walls, can hear faint sounds from the courtyard below, the occasional murmur of voices or creak of wood or movement of animals, but it is all distant, muted, a lullaby rather than a disturbance. The walls around you are thick stone, perhaps 2 feet thick at least, built to last for centuries, to withstand sandstorms and extreme temperatures and the simple erosion of time. They are keeping the precious heat in, the accumulated warmth from the day's sun and the evening's fires, releasing it slowly throughout the night, moderating the temperature inside even as the desert outside drops below freezing. The engineering is simple but brilliant, the product of thousands of years of human experience building in harsh environments, knowledge refined and passed down through generations. You lie still, letting your body relax completely, feeling the tension drain from your muscles, the aches and soreness of the day's travel beginning to fade. Your breathing slows and deepens, your heartbeat becoming more regular, your thoughts becoming less focused and more diffuse. You are safe. You are warm. You are fed. You have water. All the basic requirements of survival are met, and your body knows it, is responding by initiating the processes of rest and repair that only happen when the threat level drops to zero. This room, this small chamber in this caravanserai, sits halfway between east and west, a point on the map equidistant from the Chinese capital and the Mediterranean Sea, from the Pacific Ocean and the Persian Gulf. You are at the crossroads of the world, in a place where cultures and religions and languages and goods all mix together, where the exotic becomes familiar and the familiar becomes exotic, where a traveler from any land can find both strangeness and recognition. The Silk Road is more than just a trade route, you reflect drowsily. It is a river of culture, flowing in both directions, carrying not just silk and spices and precious metals, but ideas and technologies and stories and songs. Buddhism traveling east from India into China, paper and gunpowder traveling west from China to the Islamic world and eventually to Europe. Mathematical innovations and astronomical knowledge moving in all directions. This exchange, this constant back and forth of goods and knowledge, is as important as any empire, as influential as any king, shaping the development of human civilization in ways both obvious and subtle. And you are part of it, however small your role. By traveling this route, by carrying goods from one place to another, by participating in this network of trade and exchange, you are contributing to something larger than yourself, something that will outlast you, something important. The thought is comforting in a way, gives meaning to the hardship and danger, transforms mere survival into purpose. The wind sings over the high walls, a constant voice, eternal and patient. You are perfectly safe here, protected by stone and community and the simple human agreement that travelers will help travelers, that civilization persists even in the empty places, that the desert does not get to win. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, another day of heat or cold or wind, another test of endurance, but tomorrow is far away. Tonight there is only this room, this warmth, this safety. Your eyelids are heavy now, closing despite any intention to keep them open. Your thoughts are fragmenting, becoming dreamlike logic giving way to pure sensation and emotion. The smell of wool and stone and the faint lingering scent of cardamom from your tea, the softness of the carpets beneath you, the weight of the blanket over you, the sound of the wind outside, kept at bay by thick walls. The knowledge that you are not alone, that all around you in their own rooms and spaces are dozens of other travelers. all resting, all safe, all part of this temporary community. And as the desert wind sings over the high walls, the caravanserai sleeps, a safe harbor in the sea of sand. The trade is done, the tea is finished, and you are safe. Sleep well.